In a busy Nigerian city, twin boys were born, Kelechi and Chinedu. From the moment they came into the world, it was clear they looked exactly alike. Their brown eyes, dark skin and curly hair were the same, but even though they looked the same, they were completely different inside. Kelechi was always brave, loud and loved attention, while Chinedu was quiet, shy and often kept to himself. Everyone loved Kelechi's confidence, especially their mother, Mama Ugo. Mama Ugo adored Kelechi. "You are the lion of our family," she would say, hugging him tightly. But when it came to Chinedu, she would sigh. "Why can't you be more like your brother?" she would ask, shaking her head in disappointment. Chinedu felt the sting of those words every time. No matter what he did, it was never enough for her. Kelechi got all the praises, all the love, and Chinedu was left in the shadows. As they grew older, the differences between them became more obvious. Kelechi was popular in school, always surrounded by friends, while Chinedu kept to himself, too shy to talk to anyone. At home, it was the same story. Mama Ugo would cook Kelechi's favorite meals and praise him for his achievements, while Chinedu ate quietly, his heart heavy with sadness. He wished for just one moment where his mother would look at him with the same pride as she had for Kelechi, but that moment never came. When they reached university, things did not get better for Chinedu. Kelechi quickly became one of the most popular students on campus. He joined clubs, made new friends and was always the center of attention. Meanwhile, Chinedu struggled to make even a single friend. He stayed in the background, too afraid to speak up. It was during this time that Chinedu first saw Adaora, a beautiful girl in their class. One afternoon, Kelechi noticed the way Chinedu looked at Adaora. "You like her, don't you?" Kelechi teased, nudging his brother. Chinedu's face turned red and he quickly shook his head, trying to hide his feelings. But Kelechi wasn't fooled. "You should go talk to her," he encouraged. Chinedu looked down at the ground. "I can't," he mumbled. Kelechi laughed and patted his brother on the back. "You will never know if you don't try," he said. But Chinedu knew he couldn't do it. He wasn't like Kelechi. What Chinedu did not know was that Kelechi had also started to like Adaora. And unlike his brother, Kelechi had no problem walking up to her and starting a conversation. Over the next few weeks, Kelechi and Adaora became close. They spent time together laughing and getting to know each other. Chinedu watched from the sidelines, his heart breaking a little more each day. His own brother had started dating the girl he secretly loved, but there was nothing he could do about it. Kelechi and Adora's relationship grew stronger and soon they were inseparable. Chinedu felt trapped in a nightmare he couldn't escape from. Every time he saw them together, it was like a knife twisting in his chest. He wanted to be happy for his brother, but he couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. Kelechi had everything: his mother's love, his friends, and now the girl he had always dreamed of. It wasn't fair. Months passed, and to Chinedu's horror, Kelechi proposed to Adaora. She said yes, and soon they were planning a big wedding. The day of the wedding was filled with celebration, but Chinedu felt like an outsider in his own family. He watched as Kelechi stood beside Adaora, smiling and full of joy. Everyone praised the happy couple, but no one noticed the sadness in Chinedu's eyes. His brother had taken everything from him. After the wedding, Chinedu's bitterness grew. He couldn't escape the feelings of jealousy and anger. Everywhere he turned, there was Kelechi living the life Chinedu had always wanted. He was loved by everyone, especially Adaora. The more Chinedu thought about it, the more he became convinced that Kelechi did not deserve her. The dark thoughts in his mind began to take over, and soon he came up with a terrible plan. One night, while Kelechi and Adaora were visiting the village with Chinedu and their family, Chinedu saw his opportunity. He had always been the quiet one, the one everyone overlooked, but now he could use that to his advantage. He knew that he and Kelechi looked exactly alike, and he realized that if Kelechi were gone, no one would ever know. He would take over his brother's life and finally have everything he had always wanted. The idea grew stronger in his mind. All he had to do was to make Kelechi disappear. Then he could live Kelechi's life, his marriage, his family, everything. That night, when everyone was asleep, Chinedu snuck into Kelechi's room. His heart was racing, but he told himself this was the only way. He woke Kelechi up and told him that there was something he needed to show him in the forest. Kelechi, who was half asleep and trusted his brother, followed him without any question. Once they were deep into the forest, far from the house, Chinedu struck. He hit Kelechi on the head with a heavy branch, knocking him to the ground. Kelechi looked up at him in shock, but Chinedu couldn't stop now. He hit him again and again until Kelechi lay still, lifeless on the ground. For a moment, Chinedu stood there staring at what he had done. His hands were shaking and his heart was pounding in his chest, but he knew there was no turning back now. He quickly buried Kelechi in a shallow grave, covering the body with dirt and leaves. Then he took Kelechi's wallet and phone and walked back to the house, pretending to be him. The next morning, when Adaora woke up, she did not suspect a thing. Chinedu had studied his brother for years and he knew how to act like him. He smiled, joked, and acted like nothing had happened. For the next few months, Chinedu lived Kelechi's life. He moved into Kelechi's house, slept in his bed, and acted like Adora's husband. At first, everything seemed perfect. He finally had everything he had ever wanted. But as time went on, cracks began to show. Adora started to notice small differences. Chinedu did not remember certain things, like Kelechi's favorite meals or their special inside jokes. Adora tried to ignore it at first, but the feeling that something was wrong wouldn't go away. One day, while cleaning the house, she found an old letter tucked away in a drawer. The letter was from Chinedu, written before Kelechi and Adora got married. In it, Chinedu confessed his love for her. The handwriting was unmistakably his, and Adora began to piece things together. The more she thought about it, the more the pieces of the puzzle started to fit. The way Kelechi had been acting differently, the small things he didn't remember, it all pointed to one thing. This wasn't her real husband. Adora became suspicious and began quietly investigating. She went to the village and asked around, trying to find out what had really happened the night Kelechi disappeared. Slowly, the truth began to come out. No one had seen Kelechi since that night in the forest. Adora's heart sank as she realized what must have happened. She returned home and confronted Chinedu, demanding the truth. At first, Chinedu tried to deny it, but Adora was relentless. After hours of questioning, Chinedu finally broke down and confessed to everything. He told her how he had killed Kelechi and taken his place. Adora was devastated. The man she had been living with for months was not her husband, but his murderer. She felt a mixture of shock, anger, and heartbreak. How could Chinedu have done something so terrible? She couldn't believe that the shy, quiet brother she had known had been capable of such crime. But Adora knew she had to be strong. Despite the shock and pain she felt, she knew what needed to be done. Without hesitation, she went to the police and reported the crime. Chinedu was arrested that very night. As the police led him away, he looked back at Adora. With tears in his eyes, "I only wanted to be loved," he whispered. But Adora couldn't forgive him for what he had done. The man she had once trusted as her brother-in-law had taken away the man she loved. The news of Kelechi's murder and Chinedu's arrest spread quickly. Their family and the entire community were in shock. Mama Ugo, who had always favored Kelechi, was devastated. She had lost both sons, one to death and the other to prison. She could not understand how Chinedu, her shy and quiet son, could have committed such a horrible crime. The grief was too much for her, and she fell ill, unable to cope with the loss. For days, Mama Ugo stayed in bed, crying and refusing to eat. She blamed herself for what had happened. "If only I had loved Chinedu more," she sobbed. Maybe none of this would have happened. She realized too late that her favoritism had driven a wedge between her sons. The guilt ate away at her, and she never fully recovered from the tragedy. Meanwhile, Adora was left to pick up the pieces of her shattered life. She couldn't stay in the house that had once been filled with love and happiness. Everywhere she looked, she saw reminders of Kelechi. His clothes, his books, the chair he used to sit in. It was too painful to bear, so she decided to move out, taking her daughter with her. The house that had once been a home was now filled with too many dark memories. As the days turned into weeks, Adora struggled to move on. She kept thinking about how different things could have been if only Chinedu had spoken up about his feelings years ago. But now it was too late. She couldn't change the past and she had to find a way to live with the present. Her heart ached for Kelechi and she often found herself crying at night, missing the man she had loved. Chinedu, now in prison, had plenty of time to think about what he had done. At first, he tried to convince himself that it had been all worth it, that he had done what he had to do to finally get the life he deserved. But as the days passed, the weight of his actions began to sink in. He had not only taken his brother's life, but he had also destroyed his own. In his jealousy and desperation, he had lost everything. The prison was cold and lonely. Chinedu spent most of his days in silence, thinking about the choices he had made. He missed his brother despite everything, and he missed the life they used to have before the bitterness had taken over. Now he had nothing. No family, no friends, no future. The walls of the cells were a constant reminder of the life he could never go back to. One day, Mama Ogo came to visit him in prison. She had not seen him since the day he was arrested, and when she looked at him through the glass, her heart broke. How did it come to this, Chinedu? She asked, tears streaming down her face. Chinedu couldn't meet her eyes. He had no answer. All he could feel was shame. For the first time, his mother did not look at him with disappointment or anger. Instead, she looked at him with sadness and regret. I'm sorry, Chinedu whispered, his voice barely audible. I'm sorry for everything. Mama Ugo nodded, but the pain in her eyes did not fade. I should have loved you more, she said softly. I should have been a better mother to you. They sat in silence for a long time, both of them mourning the family they had lost. But no matter how much they wished for things to be different, they knew it was too late. As the years went by, Adaora slowly began to rebuild her life. She found a new place to live and focused on raising her daughter, who was too young to fully understand what had happened. Adaora made sure to surround her with love and care, determined to give her the happy childhood that had been taken away from her. But there was always a part of Adaora that felt incomplete. Kelechi had been her soulmate, and losing him had left a hole in her heart that could never be filled. Occasionally, Adora would visit Kelechi's grave, bringing flowers and sitting in silence as she thought about the life they had planned together. She would whisper to him, telling him how much she missed him and how much their daughter had grown. It brought her some comfort to feel close to him, even if only for a little while. In prison, Chinedu became a ghost of the man he once was. He rarely spoke to anyone, keeping to himself and living in a world of regret. Every day he thought about what he had done and how he had destroyed the lives of the people he loved most. He knew that he would never be forgotten, and he accepted that this was the price of the actions he had to pay for. One day, years after the tragedy, Adora received a letter in the mail. It was from Chinedu. She hesitated before opening it, unsure if she even wanted to read what he had to say, but curiosity got the better of her, and she unfolded the letter. In it, Chinedu apologized for everything. He explained how his jealousy and feelings of inadequacy had driven him to what he did. He asked for forgiveness, though he knew he did not deserve it. Adora read the letter carefully, her emotions swelling inside her. She felt anger, sadness, and pity all at once. She wasn't sure if she could ever forgive Chinedu for taking Kelechi from her, but as she read his words, she realized that holding on to the anger wasn't going to bring Kelechi back. It had been so many years, and while the pain was still there, she did not want to live with bitterness in her heart forever. In the end, Adora did not respond to Chinedu's letter. She wasn't ready to forgive him, but she also did not want to carry the burden of hate. Instead, she decided to focus on her future, on raising her daughter and finding peace in the memories of the life she had once had with Kelechi. Years later, when Mama Ugo passed away, Chinedu wasn't allowed to attend the funeral. Adora went with her daughter, standing by the grave of the woman who had loved one son so much and neglected the other. As she stood there, she couldn't help but think about how things might have been different if Mama Ugo had treated her sons equally, but those were questions that would never have answers. After the funeral, Adora felt a sense of closure. The chapter of her life that had been filled with so much pain and loss was finally coming to an end. She wasn't the same person she had been before the tragedy, but she had found a way to move forward. She had learned that even in the darkest times, there was always hope for healing, even if the scars would never fade fully. Chinedu remained in prison for the rest of his life. Though he would never be free, he found a strange kind of peace in knowing that he had taken responsibility for his actions. He knew he could never undo the past, but in his quiet moments, he prayed for forgiveness from Kelechi, from Adora, and from himself. In the end, the story of the twins became a lesson for everyone in their community. It was a reminder of how dangerous jealousy and favoritism could be, how they could tear families apart and lead to unthinkable consequences. And while the pain of what had happened would never truly disappear, those who were left behind had learned to carry on, holding on to the memory of their loved ones close as they built a new future.